Hello, and welcome back to Speak English Daily.
Hi everyone, we are very happy to see you here today.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Speak English Daily. Before we begin, please subscribe, leave a like, and share this episode with another English learner. Today we're talking about two words that seem almost identical, yet somehow make many learners stop and think. Something funny happened to me recently, and it made me curious. I was chatting with a friend, and I said, "I can't recall where I left my jacket." He smiled and said, "You could just say 'remember' there." We both laughed because I suddenly wondered whether I had made a mistake.
That is a great story because I have wondered the same thing for years. I hear remember almost every day, but recall appears much less often. Sometimes I think they are twins, and other times they feel like distant cousins. I've never been completely sure where the line is.
My first reaction was to ask, "So was I wrong?" My friend said, "Not really." That answer made me even more curious because it did not solve the mystery. If both words can work, why do people choose one instead of the other?
That question has followed me for a long time. I never wanted to memorize a complicated rule. I simply wanted to know what sounds natural when real people are talking to each other.
Maybe that is the better question. Instead of asking which word is correct, perhaps we should notice which word people naturally reach for in different situations.
I like that idea. It feels more like listening than studying. You start paying attention to conversations and little patterns appear without anyone giving a long explanation.
Let me try something. Imagine your friend calls and asks, "Do you remember my birthday?" That sounds comfortable to me. I don't even stop to think about it.
I agree. Now imagine someone says, "Can you recall the number on that old train ticket?" Somehow my brain reacts differently. I almost feel myself searching through old memories before answering.
That's interesting. We haven't explained anything yet, but those two questions already feel different. One arrives quickly, while the other almost invites you to pause for a moment.
I notice that too. It's like one word walks into the conversation without knocking, while the other waits politely before entering. I can't explain why yet, but I can feel it.
Maybe that feeling is more important than a long definition. If we keep listening to real conversations today, perhaps the difference will slowly reveal itself without becoming confusing.
I have a feeling that many of our listeners are thinking the same thing right now. So instead of rushing toward an answer, let's stay curious together. Notice the words as they appear and discover why English seems to need both of them in the first place.
Since we're paying attention instead of searching for rules, let's try a little experiment together. Think about your day from the moment you woke up this morning. I bet the word remember quietly appeared several times without you even noticing. Before we go any further, we'd love to hear from you. What's one thing you always forget but wish you could remember? Leave your answer in the comments because I'm curious to see if we're all forgetting the same things.
I already have one answer, my phone charger. I can leave the house with everything else, but somehow the charger stays behind. Then halfway through the day, I think, "Oh no, I forgot it again."
Mine is much less exciting. Every evening, I tell myself, "Remember to lock the door." It has become part of my routine now. If I don't say those words in my head, I feel like I've missed something.
That little phrase is so common, isn't it? Remember to... We use it with so many everyday tasks. Remember to call your sister. Remember to bring your notebook. Remember to water the plants.
Or parents saying, "Remember to do your homework before you watch television." I don't think children hear that sentence only once in their lives.
Definitely not. My mother had another favorite expression. She would smile and say, "Don't forget your lunch." I heard it so often that I almost hear her voice even now.
Birthdays are another example. Every family has one person who remembers every birthday without checking a calendar. Then there are people like me who happily depend on reminders.
I use reminders for appointments too. If someone tells me about a meeting next Thursday, I write it down immediately. Otherwise, I might remember it today, but completely forget it by next week.
Shopping is another interesting one. Have you ever walked into a supermarket feeling confident, only to realize you should have made a shopping list?
More times than I care to admit. I remember buying fruit, bread, and coffee, then I get home and discover I forgot the one thing I actually needed. That shopping list would have saved me.
Here's something funny. While we've been talking, I've said remember so many times that I've stopped noticing it.
Really? I wasn't counting.
Neither was I, but I think I've said remember 6 times already.
Now that you mention it, that's hilarious. We use it so naturally that our ears almost ignore it. Nobody stops a conversation to think, what an interesting word choice.
Maybe that's our first real clue. Some words become such a natural part of everyday English that we hardly notice them at all.
And perhaps that's why remember feels so comfortable. It quietly follows us through birthdays, homework, shopping, appointments, routines, and all those ordinary moments that fill our lives. We simply use it without thinking, and that may be telling us something important already.
I think you're onto something. If remember appears so naturally in everyday life, maybe we should pay attention to the moments when we suddenly choose a different word instead. Let's imagine someone asks you a few questions. Can you tell me the address of the house where you lived 10 years ago?
I know the house, I can picture the street, and even the front door, but I can't recall the address right away. Give me a second. No, it's still hiding somewhere in my mind.
Did you notice what you just said? What do you mean? You didn't say, I can't remember the address. You naturally said, I can't recall the address. I wasn't expecting that, but somehow it sounded perfect.
You're right. I didn't even think about it. It just came out that way. Maybe because I felt like I was searching through old information instead of talking about something familiar.
Let's test that idea. What was your best friend's phone number when you were a teenager?
Oh, that's another tricky one. I remember calling him almost every day after school, but I can't recall the number anymore. That's funny because I know it used to be so easy.
There it is again. First, you remembered the experience, then you tried to recall the specific information.
I never realized I was doing that.
Neither did I until this conversation. Try one more. Imagine you're sitting in an exam and someone asks a question you studied last night.
I would probably think, come on, I know this. Then I'd sit quietly and try to recall the answer. Sometimes it appears after a few seconds, and sometimes it doesn't.
That feels different from simply remembering something, doesn't it?
It does. It feels like opening an old drawer and looking for one particular piece of paper.
Here's another situation. Yesterday, we had a long conversation before recording. Can you recall what we talked about first?
Let me think. We spoke about travel plans before anything else. It took me a moment, but I found it.
Interesting. If I asked whether you remembered having that conversation, the question would feel easier. But asking you to recall what happened first made you search for a detail.
I think something just clicked for me. I can remember meeting someone at a conference a few years ago, but I can't recall his name. Those two ideas belong together, yet they aren't doing the same job.
That's the difference we've been looking for without chasing a definition. One word stays with the experience, while the other reaches into your memory for something more specific.
And the best part is that we discovered it ourselves. Nobody handed us a complicated rule. We simply listened to our own conversations, noticed the pattern, and suddenly the choice between remember and recall began making much more sense than it ever had before.
I have to admit something. Even after everything we've discovered today, I still know what it feels like to freeze when speaking another language. I can read a page without much trouble. I recognize plenty of vocabulary, and I understand what people are saying. Then someone asks me a simple question, and my mind suddenly becomes very quiet. Have you ever had that feeling?
More times than I would like to admit. It can be frustrating because you know you studied the words, you know they are somewhere in your mind, but they refuse to appear when you need them most.
Years ago, I thought that meant I hadn't learned enough. I would go home and study even more vocabulary. Then the same thing happened again during my next conversation, and I started wondering if I was doing something wrong.
I think many listeners have experienced that. They leave a lesson feeling confident, but when it's time to speak, they hesitate. The silence lasts only a few seconds, yet it feels much longer.
That's the part people don't often talk about. We sometimes mistake a slow answer for failure, when really our brain is just searching.
I have a picture in my mind that helps me understand it. Imagine your vocabulary is like a huge library. Every word you have learned is already inside the building.
I like where this is going.
The books are there, you just can't find the right shelf fast enough. During a conversation, your brain becomes the librarian. Sometimes it reaches the correct shelf immediately. Other times it walks past a few rows before finding the book you need.
That makes so much sense. The vocabulary hasn't disappeared, it isn't lost. You're simply trying to find it before the conversation moves on.
That's how I think about recall now. You're searching through the library for one particular book. You know it belongs there, but locating it takes a little time.
And recognizing a word is completely different. When someone else says it, your brain immediately thinks, "Oh yes, I know that one." Finding it yourself while speaking is another challenge.
Which is why we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. Every real conversation trains that librarian to work a little faster.
I wish more learners understood that. A short pause doesn't mean your English is poor. Sometimes it simply means your brain is organizing thousands of words before choosing the best one.
Couldn't agree more. Confidence doesn't grow because you never hesitate. It grows because you keep speaking even after those moments. Little by little, recognizing words becomes easier, recalling them becomes quicker, and conversations begin to feel smoother. One day you'll notice that you're answering without searching nearly as much, and that's a wonderful sign that your English is becoming part of your everyday life instead of something you only study in a book.
I really like that library picture because it also explains why memory can be so funny. Have you ever walked into a room feeling completely confident, then stopped and thought, "Why did I come in here?" It happens to me at least once a week. I stand there looking around as if the walls are going to answer the question for me.
I have done that many times. The strange part is that the moment I walk back into the previous room, the answer suddenly appears. It's almost as if my memory says, "Oh, you wanted your headphones." It makes no sense, but it always makes me laugh.
Our brains certainly have their own personalities. Another situation makes me smile every time. You meet someone who happily says hello, they clearly know you, and you recognize their face immediately. Then your brain whispers, "Good luck remembering the name."
That is when I quietly think, it's on the tip of my tongue. I know the name hasn't disappeared forever. It is somewhere in that library we talked about, but the librarian hasn't reached the right shelf yet.
I never realized how comforting that expression is. It tells the other person, "I know this, I just need another moment."
Speaking of funny moments, I once spent 15 minutes looking for my glasses. I searched the bedroom, the kitchen, even inside my backpack. Finally, my daughter looked at me and said, "Dad, they're on your head."
Please tell me you're joking.
I wish I were. I laughed so hard that I almost forgot why I was searching in the first place.
That story reminds me of people wandering around a huge parking lot pressing the car key again and again because they can't find where they parked.
I've done that too. At first, I remember driving to the shopping center without any problem. Then I start checking every row and thinking, I can't recall where I left the car. A few minutes later, I spot it and suddenly everything becomes obvious.
Wait a second.
What did you notice?
Listen to us. We keep saying remember when we're talking about ordinary experiences, but every time we start searching harder for one missing piece, we suddenly switch to recall.
You're right. We didn't plan that. It happened naturally.
And that's probably why this conversation feels so different from reading a dictionary. We're discovering the pattern while talking instead of trying to memorize a rule.
I think that's the best kind of learning. You hear real situations, your ears notice what sounds natural, and before long your instincts become stronger. The next time you can't find a name, an address, or where you parked your car, you'll probably hear yourself choosing the word recall without even stopping to think about it, while remember will continue to feel like your everyday companion in countless ordinary conversations.
I think it's funny how our conversation began with two vocabulary words, yet somehow we've arrived at something much more personal. The longer we talk about memory, the more I realize that some moments never really leave us. They quietly stay with us, even after many years.
I know what you mean. There are memories that feel older than photographs. You don't visit them every day, but when they return, they bring back a feeling before they bring back the facts.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. I was thinking about my grandmother this morning. I remember sitting beside her while she baked bread. I can almost smell it even now, but if you asked me what we talked about that afternoon, I honestly couldn't recall the conversation.
That happens to me with my grandfather. I remember the sound of his laughter more clearly than anything else. I don't recall every story he told, but I remember how safe I felt whenever I was with him.
Isn't that interesting? Sometimes our hearts remember what our minds can't fully explain.
They really do. I also think about my first teacher from time to time. I remember walking into her classroom feeling nervous on the first day of school. I can't recall every lesson she taught, yet I still remember the smile that made me feel welcome.
Teachers have a wonderful way of becoming part of our memories without realizing it. Years later, we may forget pages from a textbook, but we remember the kindness that gave us confidence.
Old friends are similar. Last month, I met someone I hadn't seen for almost 20 years. We started talking, and within minutes, it felt as if no time had passed. I couldn't recall every adventure we had together, but I remembered how easily we laughed.
Family traditions have that power too. Every birthday in my family followed almost the same pattern. There was music, homemade food, far too many photographs, and someone telling the same funny story every single year. I couldn't tell you what happened at each celebration, but I remember the happiness they created.
We sometimes believe memories are made from details, yet I think they're often made from emotions instead.
I love that thought because it feels true. The older I become, the more I realize that the feeling of a moment often stays much longer than the facts surrounding it.
Maybe that's why language has room for both remember and recall. One helps us speak about the people and experiences that remain close to our hearts. The other helps us search for the missing pieces when we want to be more specific.
And somehow, both words become more meaningful when they're connected to real life instead of grammar exercises.
I think that's something worth remembering. The happiest memories aren't always the ones with the clearest details. Sometimes the picture is slightly blurred, the dates have disappeared, and the conversations are long forgotten. Yet the warmth remains, and that feeling can stay with us for a lifetime, becoming one of the most precious gifts our memories quietly give us.
You know, after everything we've talked about today, I don't think the biggest lesson came from a dictionary. It came from listening to ourselves speak. So let me try one last comparison. If I say, I remember my grandmother, that sounds completely natural. But if I ask, can you recall what she said that day? It somehow feels different, even though both sentences talk about the past.
I was smiling because I noticed the same thing. The first sentence brings a person into your heart. The second one asks your mind to search for something specific. Nobody told us to do that. It simply happened as we talked.
That's what makes this so interesting. Native speakers aren't usually thinking, now I'll choose remember, or now I'll choose recall. They simply speak, and the words seem to find their own places.
I think that's why trying to memorize long rules can sometimes make learning harder. Real conversations teach patterns that are difficult to notice on a grammar page.
Looking back, we never stopped our conversation to study. We shared funny stories, talked about childhood, laughed about forgotten glasses, and remembered people who mattered to us. Somehow, those experiences explained the words better than a long lesson could.
I agree. Language grows through experiences. The more conversations you have, the more your ears begin to recognize what sounds natural. After a while, your choices become instincts instead of decisions.
So, instead of worrying about perfect English, maybe we should become better listeners. Pay attention to how people naturally speak. You'll be surprised how much you learn without realizing it.
And don't be afraid of making mistakes along the way. Every conversation gives your memory another opportunity to grow stronger. Little by little, finding the right word becomes easier.
Here's a simple challenge for today. Remember someone's birthday without looking at your phone. It could be a family member, a close friend, or someone you haven't spoken to for a while. Then send them a message if you can.
I have another challenge for tomorrow. Before you go to bed, try recalling yesterday's conversations. Who did you speak with? What made you laugh? What interesting story did someone share? You don't have to recall every detail. Just notice what comes back naturally.
Those tiny exercises don't feel like homework, but they quietly help your English become part of your everyday life.
And that's the secret we've been discovering together. Use remember for the moments that naturally come to you. Use recall when your mind begins searching for something hidden. The more you speak, the more comfortable that difference will feel.
Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. What's one memory you'll always remember? And can you recall every detail of it?
Thank you for spending this time with us. Keep enjoying English, keep sharing your stories, and keep trusting the learning process. One conversation at a time, you'll notice that these words no longer feel confusing. They'll simply become part of the way you naturally express yourself every single day.